Hi, this is Claire Pratzia from Very Do Papery, and in this video I have 4 cards to share with you using 2 floral stamp and die sets, but a lot of different color and layout variations to kind of stretch your stamps and dies. So here's how Spellbinder stamps and die sets come. I had never played with Spellbinder stamps before, so I wanted to show you what it looked like. It's a bit different from if you're getting some photopolymer clear stamps. Those are pretty standard packaging. You'll see throughout the video that these rubber stamps stamp beautifully. So for the first card, which is the easiest, I'm going to take the floral image from Rough Waters and stamp this in Hero Art's Aegean ink on some scrap Bristol cardstock. I'm using Bristol cardstock because I want to color this in really quickly with my Zig Clean color pens. I'm just using 2 pink colors, that's it. And I'll have all the names of all the colors of the zigs that I use throughout this video on my blog. I'm just not going to mention them in this video because oftentimes I forget what it is halfway through narrating this video and then I have to go back through my blog post and start the audio again. So everything will be listed on my blog. So after I color these in real quick, I'm going to die cut them and then I'm going to randomly, sort of, adhere them to a piece of light pool layering paper, top them with some gems and a heat embossed sentiment from the other stamp set, Grow Newer With Me, and that will finish off the card. So the next step up card is pretty much the same process. I'm stamping the same floral image in Deep Ocean ink from Hero Arts. I'm stamping this on Bristol cardstock again, and then this time we're stepping it up a little bit because we're using different colors. I kind of varied the colors throughout the flowers. So how I kept track of what I was coloring is I would color one flower center pink, one flower center red, one flower center yellow, and then I would go through, I'd kind of go through just the flower centers, and I would go through alternating the colors on the leaves and the inner flower. I topped it off with a pearl and then a heat embossed sentiment from, I think it's Totally Random Sayings Volume 2 by Essentials by Ellen. For this next card, I'm going to be stamping all of the floral images from Grow Newer With Me. I'm going to be stamping it all in navy, but because I want to add some clear heat embossing, I'm going to ink up my stamp first in Versamark. So you'll see me pull out my Versamark pad, and I actually have 2 Versamark pads. One of them is pretty clean, and the other one is a mess. This one you can already see it's a mess, but it still has some of that stickiness. So instead of getting rid of it, I use it for cards such as this, where I'm not really going to worry about cleaning my stamp off in between. So first I'm inking up my stamp in Versamark, and then I'm inking it up in navy, and then I will repeat the process to create an entire background, and then I'll cover it with clear embossing powder, and then I'll heat set it. So by adding that Versamark first before we add the navy ink, we're going to get that stickiness from the Versamark so we can add that clear embossing powder. Otherwise, the Hero Arts ink is not sticky enough by itself to attract that embossing powder. So you will see that my Versamark ink pad progressively gets really dirty, and to kind of limit how dirty it gets, I do stamp the flower off to the side a couple times, so I'm limiting a bit how much of that navy ink is getting on there. After I've heat set the flowers, I'm going to color them in with my Zig brush pens, and I just wanted to point out that I'm not using pens that are necessarily the same hue. The darkest and the lightest pens I'm using are pretty much the same hue. If you take one shade of blue and you add more white or you darken it a lot, those 2 pens would pretty much be in the same range. But the in-between pen, the one that I'm using to kind of add shading, it's more bright blue. I just kind of like the extra pop it gave, and basically I'm just pointing out that even though, at least with the Zig real brush pens, even if colors aren't necessarily in the same hue, you can still pair them together and you can get some really pretty results. So I'm just using that bright blue to add color to the darker portions, I'm guessing, of the flower. and then I'm dragging it out with the kind of more dull pale blue, and then I'm going to color in the leaves with, I'm going to just add a big dash of the darkest blue, and then I'll drag that out with the light blue. I really like using zigs for this. It's just really easy for someone who's not super comfortable with coloring to get some fun, quick, and easy results. So this card was an experiment and a lesson of what not to do. So I basically repeated the same process that I did with that previous blue card, except this time I'm stamping in ocean ink. And there are two things that I wanted to point out with this. One, with an ink pad as stained as this Versamark one is, if I was stamping this flower in a light pink right now, the navy ink on the top of that Versamark pad would definitely be affecting the light pink. Since I'm using ocean, it's not really having that much of an effect. You can't really tell that there's any navy mixing in there. But if you are stamping in a lighter color than what is on your Versamark pad, then it's going to affect that. Also, the whole point of using this Versamark pad was that I could get that stickiness, but because I had so much navy ink on it from the previous card, there was just too much ink on the top of that Versamark pad to really pick up any stickiness. So even though I went through this whole rigmarole, you know, inking it up twice, I ended up not getting that much clear powder on the card. It wouldn't really stick. I mean, just in a couple places would it stick because I just lost the Versamark stickiness by getting it all cruddy with that navy ink. So, lesson learned, that Versamark pad is probably ruined, but it was on the last legs of its life anyway, so I mean, that's fine. But, you know, lesson learned, if you want to get the stickiness from the Versamark, just clean your stamp in between uses. And then you won't have that problem. So, after I heat set the little bit of clear embossing powder that would actually stick to the card, then I die cut some masking tape, and you can see I don't have any masking tape that's actually wide enough for this die, but I just took two strips, adhered them together, and that was wide enough for my die cuts. Also, I'm using my mini Sizzix machine, and I had posted on Instagram about that a couple months ago, I think. And I actually really like using it. Most of the time I use smaller dies anyway, so it's actually pretty handy. So I don't have to drag my cuddle bug out every time. And so after I've die cut these flowers, you'll see I kind of rub them on my arm a little bit, just because the masking tape that I use, I think I got it from a construction, like Lowe's or something, just a construction store, so it's not stamping masking tape necessarily, so it's pretty sticky. So to take away some of that stickiness so that the masking tape doesn't rip when I peel it off, I just kind of rubbed it on my arm a little bit, and that takes away some of the tackiness of the tape. So I actually only die cut 4 of these flowers because I was lazy and I decided I could just move them around. And I'm blending a background of dandelion ink from Hero Arts. You could actually get a more vibrant yellow from this, but I wanted a more pale yellow, so I just did kind of light dusting, I guess. And after I got that one corner, you can see I just moved them around, and that way I don't have to die cut. I guess it would be like 3 or 4 more flowers. I mean, it's not a whole lot, but again, I'm lazy, and we saw how well that worked with the Versamark pad. So after I finish blending my background, I am again going in with my Zig brushes, and I'm adding a darker red again to the parts of the flower that I assume would be darker, and then I'm just drawing it out with a lighter red. That's pretty much my technique when it comes to zigs. I add a darker color where I think the shading would be the darkest, and then I just drag it out with a lighter color. I mean, that's probably the idea for a lot of coloring techniques, but zigs are pretty much the only color medium that I'm relatively familiar with. So that's what I did for the flowers themselves, but for the leaves I just used pale green. I didn't bother with shading at this point. I was pretty much done with this card. I topped this card off with a sentiment from Hello Sunshine Daisies stamped in ocean ink, And then I added a strip of cardstock to the bottom that I had just saturated with ocean ink, so I had, the custom color to match perfectly with the flowers. So here's the recap of all the cards and all the different styles and backgrounds you can get just from 2 sets. Playing around with colors and layouts, I think that's one of the reasons why so many people like floral cards. I mean, I know that's why I do, because there's just unlimited color possibilities and layouts are pretty fun. With the first card, I had all the flowers going in one direction, and with the mint card, I kind of rotated them at different angles. So it was really just, I kind of had to make myself stop playing with these stamp sets because I had other things to do, but they really were super fun. So the last thing I want to share is kind of a little bit about my creative process. So you might have noticed with some of these cards at the beginning of the clip, I had a piece of paper that kind of looked like what the card was going to end up with, at least color-wise. I don't know if this is something that I do just because when I started making cards, I was 14, I didn't really have, I mean, even cardstock was expensive then. So I always like to stamp on scratch paper first. I hate messing up really nice cardstock, even if it's not super nice cardstock. I hate messing it up. So I always like to test things on scrap cardstock, layouts, colors. I have a whole bunch of scrap paper cut down to A2 size on the side of my desk just so I can experiment. It's usually paper, and when I was in school I would just use old school papers and I would stamp on the back of them, just so I could get a little more use out of that school paper. But it was just a little bit of my creative process, and I thought it might be kind of fun to share. So anyway, I have all the supplies linked on my blog, and if you have any questions or comments, you can leave them on this video or on my blog. I'm not sure how clear I wasn't explaining these because it's the night before, and I procrastinated basically for a month on this. I just need to get it done. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching, and God bless. Bye.